Hello, welcome to Liberty Explored. This is Isaac the Explorer. I got a great video for you today. This is Dave Smith and Nick Fuentes discussing the concept of what's worse, bigotry or mass murder? You tell me. All right, let's get right into it.
To talk about this is like totally in the it was before wokeism really became a thing, and then of course before the reaction to wokeism became a thing. But even back in like 2012, I used to always say that the president of the United States could like drop a bomb on a third world country on a wedding and like kill 70 people, and then the same day he could say the blacks instead of African Americans, and the latter would be a bigger scandal than the prior. And like, there's something fundamentally wrong with that. Like that's a really sick thing about your society.
Yeah.
And there is this almost like, and I think has been for my entire lifetime, maybe before that probably, that there's almost this unspoken cultural value that clearly is a left-wing value that puts at the absolute top of the hierarchy of outrages bigotry. Like bigotry is supposed to be up here at the absolute. That's the worst thing in the world that you can be. When in fact, like that is just not my moral outlook on the world. Yeah, bigotry is something we all have in excess. I think it's bad, but there's much worse things than that. And one of the things that I always found very interesting was that the alt-right guys were really anti-war. And this also for you and the Groypers are very anti-war. And so to me, in my world, like war is really a much worse thing than racism. Yeah. I'm not sure how there's a counter argument to that, although we treat it like war is that's just policy, and this is the worst thing you can do. And so I immediately rejected that. And so in fact, with the Jordan Peterson thing, I'll leave him alone after this, but it's like, you want to talk about psychopaths? Like, sir, you were on record saying, give them hell. That was your response. And for the guy who talks about hell all the time.
Yeah, right.
You don't think hell it really exists? It does. You haven't met enough. Yeah, go to Gaza. Hell does exist. You said give them hell, and that's exactly what they got. Like, so, maybe examine yourself before you're saying, oh, but he said a thing about the Jews, so he's the dark tetrad. But then it just seemed to me on top of that, so that's like my worldview. Like, I don't actually think bigotry is the worst thing. I think it can be bad, but I don't think it's the worst thing. But then even from like, say, a liberal worldview, like isn't like Daryl Davis like the big hero story? And I'm not like claiming that that's what I'm doing with you. It's not. Right. But like the idea of like, you're like, even the guy who you say is the famous guy who like converted all the Klansmen, well, he did it by talking to him and being decent. Just be cool. That's like rule number one. Like always, and that always seems so obvious to me, particularly as a Jewish person, but I just like as a Jew, I would say that. But that you're just like, oh, there's these people who hate Jews. I was like, well, I should probably be cool. Because it's kind of hard for people to hate someone who's cool to them. And it's just so weird to me that everybody else's opinion is like, no, this is the one thing that's unacceptable, bigotry. Anything, the government just passed a law that says they can detain you without charges, whatever. But like no one's being a bigot about it, right? They're doing it to whites and blacks equally. Like, okay. And then number two, like, what is this thing that we ought to shut people out of the conversation? It just seems so counterproductive and stupid.
Well, and it's not even just bigotry. In particular, it's words. It's not like you even have to do a bigoted thing like you beat up a black person for being black or you discriminate actively. It's like if you have said something that sounds racist, is racist, that is worse than murder, war, etc. And that was kind of like a phenomenon this summer because I was so outspoken against the war in Gaza, and the clips were going around on TikTok and Instagram, and a lot of liberals are saying, wait a second, even he is saying this is evil. This is a guy we're supposed to hate. Maybe the broken clock is right twice a day. And I was on my show reminding people like, yeah, maybe I'm racist. Maybe we disagree on issues of race, but I'm against murder. I'm against genocide. And like you said, is that not the actual moral paradigm? Is like killing, war, famine, are these things not the real evils? And maybe bigotry is somewhere further away from that, and saying things that might be bigoted further even still from that. And we live in a society now where it seems like if you have ever uttered anything that's bad, it haunts you.
Yeah.
It's like you look at my Wikipedia page and it's like, he's a racist, sexist, homophobe, Islamophobe. In 2018, he said this. In 2020, he said that. Right. And I go on shows, and in the news reports, they list like things I have said. It's like I do a talk show. Yeah. I talk 3 hours a day for a living for 10 years. And sometimes it sounds controversial or provocative or offensive, but doesn't that kind of go with the territory of freedom of conscience? If we can think, should we not be able to speak? And if we speak, can we not be wrong? Can we not be funny? Can we not be insensitive or bombastic? And I guess this gets to something about, because you think, well, society shouldn't be this way, but why is it this way? People are hanged by their words selectively. This is like, these are tools of reputational destruction. They don't like where you're pointed, so then they look for things that are going to hurt people's feelings and say, oh, well, you shouldn't listen to this guy because he said this, and I bet you don't like how that sounds, huh? Because when you look at, I brought this up on PBD, Ben Shapiro in the year 2000, I think, wrote an article about ethnic cleansing. It said transfer is not a dirty word. And he's arguing for literal ethnic cleansing. Now, I have never argued anything close to that. I've never made the argument that we should ethnically cleanse blacks from the United States. But if I did, I'd be hanged by that forever. Yeah. Is Shapiro. Why and why not? He is not reminded of that every time he goes around, not because he apologized for it 20 years later, but because he has all the correct opinions. He's 100%. Not a target. He's got backing. And so that kind of tells us that, and by the way, the same applies to all other kinds of scandals. If we want to have an open society, and that's ironic coming from me, but we do need
libertarian Nick Fuentes.
Yeah, sort of. It's like you do need some level of tolerance, actually, to inoculate yourself from using reputational destruction for political control, because that's what I've come to realize about it.
Dude, you're 100% right. Dude, I used to talk about this all the time because, as you mentioned, I was a big Ron Paul supporter when he was running for president. And when he was running for president, which is, looking back at it now in 2025 is so goddamn funny, but they'd always bring up the racist Ron Paul newsletters. The racist newsletters, which, by the way, if you look at that, it was so tame compared to anything. It was literally I think one of the things was they said, one guy in the newsletters said the LA riots only stopped because they needed their welfare check or something.
Right.
Which is like, but so you're just, and they would Ron Paul of all people to try to paint him as a hater of some sort, a dude who does not have a hateful, is just like a Christian baby doctor who's been married to the same woman for 60 something years. And they would try to pull that up, and then you'd notice oh, okay, but you look at the things Joe Biden has said in his day, look at things Hillary Clinton has said, look at all oh no, they don't ever get hit for that. In fact, the greatest libertarian theorist of all time, Murray Rothbard, in one of his most controversial articles, and we talked about this, I think, the first time we podcasted together, but he wrote this thing about David Duke, and he was making the point how they're like, well, why is it that they hate David Duke so much? And I go, oh, you say because he used to be in the Klan? And I go, well, Robert Byrd, the Lion of the Senate, he used to be in the Klan. No one has a problem with that. And so you realize, yes, this is, you make the rules so vague and so narrow that they apply to everyone, and then you choose who's going to get hit. And who always happens to get hit, very coincidentally, the people who don't support Israel in the permanent warfare state. Yep. Always. It's even with the woke right term. The definition they're working off of is you awoken to something. That makes you woke. And by the way, here's a list of all the woke right people, and they completely coincidentally happen to be all of the right-wingers who don't support Israel and don't support the warfare state. It's always what it is.
Yep. I thought that was pretty good. What do you guys think? Something about that just hits the nail on the head. This is the conversation that needs to be had. This is the perspective that everybody needs to come to the table on. Everybody needs to think about this for themselves. we need to think about different levels of what actually is bad and why. This is why free speech is so important, right? And this is why not falling for the propaganda is so important. We all have an opportunity ourselves to look at ourselves and figure out what is best for ourselves and the world. And the more we seek to blame and try and find different people that are the responsible ones, is the more we miss the chance to see for ourselves what's really important. Because the most important decision comes down to how we choose to live our life and how we choose to judge other people. Every time somebody comes out to attack me just for speaking real truth to power, I mean, that's what I'm doing. It's funny because I see a lot of the Democrats running around with their truth to power buttons and truth to power shirts and hats. And if that's really important to you, then you would like what I'm doing, because I'm doing that. I'm talking about truth. My words are not violence. My perspective is not violence. I don't choose violence ever. I'm not angry either. I'm not an angry person. I don't choose to have angry, violent reactions to other people making their choices for their life. I choose to see it as, hey, and I even externalize the blame from them because I see the bigger picture. I see that the descent into Moloch consciousness, the consciousness that is the opposite of Christ consciousness, if you want to call it that. It's the opposite of being a good person. That's what's happening to everyone, and in a way, I externalize that. I separate the blame because I recognize that we're all on a different path and we're all finding our different points in life at different periods of time. We all have these challenges that aren't the same as other people. We never are given the exact same timing. I mean, that's a beautiful thing, actually, right? And it's a way of letting go the judgment on other people. It's a way of forgiving them. There's just a really deep thing inside that, and I challenge everybody to do that for themselves. Just think a little bit about how much you choose to blame this other person for the problems of what you see in the world and what you see in yourself. Do you seek to blame an individual, no matter who it is? I don't care how powerful they are. That's the real truth to power. The power that's happening, that I'm fighting, is not does not come to the apex at a person. It's actually an ideology or a lack of values. It's a lack of moral integrity. And that is something universal. It's something that I think all societies have gone through since the dawn of humanity. And I challenge you, think about that for yourself, and think about how you can find self-love for yourself. Yesterday, I had a really great conversation with my friend. We were talking about bringing the concept of love your neighbor as thyself all the way around to where we remember that the love your neighbor really is everyone, and including the reason it says as yourself, we need to also remember love ourselves. It's just a really important thing, and it's something to think about. Right on. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time. Like and subscribe. You know what to do. Love you all, and God bless.